Welcome to the Rant Live. Thanks for joining us today, everyone, on this beautiful Monday, May 16th, following the Cubs 4-2 road trip, which was, I think, a surprise to both of us. Speaking for you, I guess, but I based on our predictions, it was a surprise.
Yeah, I mean the fact that I don't think either of us thought they would win the series in San Diego, and then I think we both felt like they'd probably go, 1-2, in Arizona, kind of have an even road trip at best, and so to see them coming out the way they did, and the thing was, what's funny about it is like they played the way in all of those games they played the way that we had kind of expected they would, right? Not a ton of power, but enough to kind of jumpstart things, and you string some hits together, you get some competent starting pitching, and some incredibly competent starting pitching at times, and that's kind of the formula. It is none of the blowout stuff. Is just like and actually scoring late runs. I think that was the biggest thing. How many times have we seen this team go out and score, jump out front or get a few early runs and then just completely forget how to score in the last 6 innings of the game? So that's weird how that works. When your pitching limits the other team and you score some runs late, you can win. Oh, weird.
It is very weird how that works, actually, but it actually did work. Yeah, I mean, the Cubs didn't really score a lot of runs. I mean, on this series, they averaged 4.5 runs a game. That was aided by a 6-0 win on the past Monday against the Padres to open the series. But really, they did not score that many runs. I mean, their offense wasn't really that different. What you talked about was, the timeliness of the hitting, right? And stringing together the runs. And while they didn't have a ton of power, they had 5 home runs, which is enough to score a few runs, which is exactly what they did. But and so their offense, I looked at the numbers for their offense over both series in San Diego and in Arizona. A 232 average, not great. 5 home runs helps. They walk rate was 6.7%. Their K rate was 27.4%. They had a WRC plus of 87.
Ugh.
That's not going to win you a lot of games. They scored 27 runs, 6, 4, 7, and then 3, 4, and 3. And the 3, 4, and 3, they won 2 out of those 3 games. And as you mentioned, it's their starters, right? It was really their pitching all together. Their starters, though, were uncharacteristically good. They were only 1-1. They got 1 win and 1 loss. That's because the bullpen kind of, did what they do, which is pitch a lot of the innings, not quite most of them, but a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they ended with a 2.97 ERA, only 1 home run, 17.6 K rate, 9.2 walk rate, and 48.5% ground ball rate, which was really good. The ERA of the relievers was 2.41, actually better. 2 home runs and a 30.4% K rate, 1.3% walk rate from the relievers, which is extraordinarily good. And so it's like the pitching really came through in this series, and that really shows you when you've got a team that has an offense like the Cubs have, they're not going to score a lot of runs. You need to have the pitching. And if you don't have the pitching, you're just not going to win many games. And up to this point, the Cubs starting pitching has been atrocious.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad. Or at least, inconsistent, I think would be another, because we were concerned about Kyle Hendricks, before, and we've seen sort of some back and forth stuff from him, and I think actually what's funny is, if you recall, I think we were both in that. I think you were the one that said it, but I certainly agreed, was that if they can't do anything against Zach Davies in the first game, like, they're going to be in trouble for that series. Well, sure enough, Zach Davies got to win on Friday, and the Cubs managed to win the next 2, and it wasn't because he was like really good or anything. He and Smiley both gave up, I think, 3 runs in the third in that one. And then, the D-backs tacked on 1 more run, and that's why Davies got the win and Smiley got the loss. Right. But that was that game, right? When you look at that loss, it was exactly as I talked about. The Cubs scored 3 runs in the third, right, to take a 3-0 lead. They immediately give that right back up, and then they lose because they don't score over the last 6 innings. They scored in 1 inning in that one, and that's what's really frustrating because, this is a team that is not built, nor should any team be. I mean, it's not like any team should go out there and just score a crooked number in 1 inning and then never score again. But this is supposed to be a team that it doesn't necessarily bust out, but, they'll get 1 run here, 2 runs there, another run over here. And, that's how they get to their 4 or 5. And when they do that, they're actually okay. It's when you see those droughts, understandably so, because if you just stop scoring, it's weird. The other team gets more of a window.
It's weird how that works.
Kind of, we didn't score for 6 innings. Oh, geez. And then you're putting it on the bullpen to have to be perfect, which, by and large, has been really, really good. Again, friend of the program, Scott Efros, continues to do really, really well. I think David Ross has actually done a pretty good job of managing that bullpen and kind of figuring out who needs to go where and working the matchups fairly well. It's not always going to work the way we want it to, because things happen, but it does help when you get the starting pitching, again, like last night, the Sunday, to see Justin Steele go deep into the game, not super deep, but I mean, he went 6 innings, right? It's his longest outing this year. It's actually only the second time in his career that he's recorded an out in the 6th inning. He had a 7-inning start, his very last appearance of last year. And so for him to be much more efficient, right? That's the biggest thing with him. And we've seen this with a lot of Cubs pitchers in general. They haven't, even Kyle Hendricks, the efficiency is not there, so that you're not even putting it in the hands of the manager at that point. Like, these guys are getting toasted by inning 4 or 5, and their pitch count is just up enough, and it's clear that their performance is slipping to where it's not worth it. And to be fair, and here's where I thought Ross made a great decision, right? That 4th inning last night, Steele looked cooked. I mean, he had a walk in there, I think. He gave up the RBI single. Right after that was an error that should have ended the inning. And then I think then is when he had the walk after that. So you think, okay, man, you just, bad circumstances, whatever. His pitch count was over 25 or so at that point. Ended up, I think, getting a strikeout and a ground out. And he threw 30 pitches in that inning. So that's where you get concerned. That's a high number, right? But then Ross stuck with him. First of all, I thought he was going to lift him before that inning was over, kept him in, and sent him back out for the 5th and 6th. 2 of maybe his best inning. The 6th inning, his last inning, was his best. 9 pitches, 2 strikeouts. And so to see him push past that and to be more efficient was a really, really good sign. However, if we have time and we want to address it, there are some very, very troubling things still to me from an organizational perspective about that start, but I'll address that later.
Yes. Tom in our comments seems to be really entertained by the fact that we thought they'd get swept if they lost the first game. I'm not sure how that's funny, but I'm glad you're so entertained.
Clearly their worst starter of that group. I mean, when you had to face Zach Gallen.
I don't know what's funny about that.
Yeah.
Anyways, Zach Gallen gave up his first home run of the season against the Cubs on Saturday night, a game I was at with my family, and so that was a lot of fun. The weird thing is that I didn't get to watch the Friday night game because or the Sunday game. I had to listen to the Sunday game. Friday I was out, but Sunday, weird, because there's a blackout here, and you can't get MLB TV, and I don't have the direct TV that carries Bally Sports Network here in Arizona. I don't have that, and so I can't watch any Diamondbacks games. That's so weird to think that I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I cannot watch any Diamondbacks games because only one carrier, DirecTV, carries Bally Sports Network, which carries the Diamondbacks games. That is
totally normal. Totally.
You want to talk about problems. It's like, I never understood blackouts just generally, because it's like you would think that you'd want the people in your city who are going to be the customers, potential customers, to watch the games, whether you're good or bad, because that's the only way you're going to garner any sort of interest. And when you're good, especially. Anyways, I'm going off here.
Well, between that and then Friday being on Apple TV Plus, right?
Yeah, that was funky too.
Which is a weird, like, I'll say this for that broadcast, because we do have it. The picture quality is like having, it's like 4K, which is funny to me because I'm sitting there going like, so they've got just this, they have all this tech for their one game a week, that there are 2 games a week, that they run. Why can't the Marquee and whomever else that have every other game, 150 plus games, why is their picture not this clear? Right. And I suppose
I
that part of
assume
that's the
I don't know if
streaming.
it's the cameras, or you wouldn't think so, right? You wouldn't think that
I
Apple
mean,
flew out,
unless they've got a full on 4K setup that nobody else does, or if it's streaming and
which
there's
would
not as
seem
much of a loss of
strange.
fidelity, as it is when because you got to go through a provider and whatever, and it's just not a straight, as direct or whatever. But they did seem a little jumpier. The angles weren't great. The quality's great. The angles are a little bit weird. Um, a lot of people are hit or miss on the broadcast crew. It's okay to me, and I know they are going for like more of a podcast feel to where it's kind of conversational. And I still reside in this camp, and I always will. When you have a local team, right, of any type that is on a national broadcast, the narrative about that team is going to have to be dumbed down, because their assumption is that they're presenting this to more than just the fans of the 2 teams that are playing, right? That they're telling you a bunch of stuff that you already know,
Yeah.
because they're assuming that they're explaining this to 10 or 12 people who aren't fans of that team that are also just tuning in to watch. I don't know why in the hell I'd turn on Apple TV Plus to watch 2 teams I don't give a shit about, but alas.
Here we are.
Yeah, but I don't see, to me there wasn't anything about it that, like, let me compare it to the Manning cast on Monday Night Football, which is different, right? Because it's not as if they're talking over another broadcast. But I enjoyed watching Peyton and Eli Manning talk about stuff during Monday Night Football, and I would watch that broadcast more than I would the standard ESPN broadcast of it, simply because 9 times out of 10, no, the Bears aren't on there, and there's not an NFC North team on there that I really want to watch lose. And so I would just watch it for that separate entertainment value. Again, I'm not going to watch if it's just the Rays playing the Rangers or something. I wouldn't tune into that, because to me, the actual broadcast itself did not lend enough of that entertainment value that I would watch it as kind of an ancillary
Well, I
reason.
mean, the
But
Manning brothers are, well known. They're
right,
not, they're
it's a
entertaining
different
in and
deal.
of themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. And they had guests on there. I would like to see. Well, I say I would like to see that, but then what is it, like A-Rod and whatever? Like, I don't want to watch that. Like, you guys are missing the point of, like, nobody hates.
He's the
Peyton and Eli
exact
Manning.
opposite end of the spectrum.
Right, like people will turn it off just because
Yeah.
A-Rod's there. I'm sure there are people that will tune in to listen to him. I don't want to hear the dude talk ever, not even if it's a normal broadcast. So I think there's a space for that. I guess where I'm going with it is I don't see this Apple TV Plus play as something that is accomplishing baseball's desired ends of kind of growing their base and bringing the sport to more people.
It's growing. No, it's growing their base. It's growing their base revenue.
Yeah, well, right. It's doing exactly what they want.
That's what they want.
In
They
the
don't
short
care
term,
how
anyway.
it works out.
Right. In the short term, they're making more money than what they were, and that's all they care about. Yeah. Beyond that, and like, it was cool. It was a neat little change of pace. I'd prefer they do something like that and still maintain the local broadcasters, but I understand that that's not the goal there, and whatever. But it was fine. We have Apple TV Plus. I was able to watch it. Thankfully we're not blacked out of that stuff, but it is a weird deal. Yeah, I guess it's really weird for you being in Arizona and still getting blacked out of a Cubs game because they're playing the Diamondbacks. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating too, because I mean, a lot of times when I did have access to the Diamondbacks games, is the Cubs games typically are on earlier and the Diamondbacks games would come on afterwards, so I could watch. I'm sure my family enjoyed watching 2 baseball games every day, but I could watch both baseball games, and I don't really care what happens with the Diamondbacks, but it's fun to watch them, and they're the home team, so now I can't. Anyways, so let's go through the games real quick. On Friday, the Cubs lose 3-4 against Zach Davies. Strangely, Smiley goes 6 innings, gives up a lot of contact, 10 hits, 4 runs, not a lot of runs, but he wasn't terrible. He was good enough to possibly get a win, but just didn't happen because the Cubs only had 5 hits, 3 singles, a double, and a triple, and that just wasn't enough. Their 6 through 9 hitters on Friday are the only ones who had hits, so no one at the top of the order got a hit, and so that's not going to win you any games. Now that flipped on Saturday because on Saturday I think they're with 2 through. Let me look. No one at the bottom of the order got any hits on Saturday. So like it completely flipped. But Hendricks was really good. A third of an inning short of a quality start, 5.2 innings, only 1 run on 5 hits, couple walks, couple strikeouts. And then Scott Effross comes on in that third of an inning at the bottom. That was at the bottom of the sixth, I guess. And throws 3 pitches for a strikeout. It's just the quickest thing you've ever seen in your life. Did not make that interesting whatsoever, at least not for Diamondbacks fans. And again, the Cubs did not get a lot of hits. They only had 4 hits on Saturday, but they won 4-2. Suzuki, Happ, and Gomes had a home run. And then Gomes also had a single. And so a really productive 4 hits, But this is, again, this is kind of what we were talking about. Like on Sunday, they only had 6 hits. So, I mean, in the 3-game series combined, they end up with 15 hits. And they win 2 of the 3 games because their starters and their relievers were so good. Steele looked great, 6 innings, 10 strikeouts, twice as many as he'd had all season long in a game. And man, he was good. Like you said, I mean, Ross he went with him, and I think when you have a guy that's struggling in an inning and you show some faith in him, especially when it's kind of later and you could pull him and he knows that, I think that did a lot for Steele, and hopefully it helps his confidence going forward because he hadn't looked really good in any of his starts since his opening start against the Pirates back in April. I think it was April 9th. And he really looked good. I really think that Justin Steele can be that number kind of 2, 3 solid starter that the Cubs need. And if you look at their starting pitching just up and down, there's a lot of potential here. I mean, there's a tremendous, if Steele can pitch well, who knows what's going to happen with Keegan Thompson, but he could roll into a starter role. Marcus Stroman, Alec Mills is supposedly coming back. Miley is back. And Hendricks. I mean, you could see their starting pitching coming together. Let me put it a different way. I don't think their starting pitching is going to be near as bad as it's been going forward. As long as everybody stays healthy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the trouble with the health all the way around is just that it's been very difficult for them to establish any sort of groove, and I I want to see. I got to see Miley a couple more times before I'm willing to really put my, like, he looked really great at the very start, and then it was just kind of like womp womp, and then Stroman's been out here, and I mean, I think it has to get better and more consistent, if only because it was so bad and inconsistent early, but I think, again, Steele's outing, really, really good sign there. Hendricks appears to have kind of gotten past some of the shakiness earlier, or at least it feels more like he's kind of pitching like himself here. Again, just having everybody, if they can get them all healthy and kind of get that rotation established. I think the biggest thing, man, is they just got to be going 5+ innings more frequently. Hey, are there times when you can cut a guy short because maybe it's, again, with Miley, maybe he's on a bit of a pitch count, whatever, and if you have a couple guys go long, you can save up that bullpen, and then you can be a little bit quicker to use it going forward. But I think that's the biggest thing is you can't have your bullpen throwing appreciably more innings than your starting rotation. That's just not a recipe for success. It's not going to work out real well, especially now, right? The rosters aren't at 28. But yeah, I think they'll be, and they've got a nice little stretch here. So hopefully that continues.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, it could get to a point where you're like, where you've got too many starters, and maybe Steele does go back into the bullpen. But one name I want to throw out there is Caleb Killian, who is just dominating at Tennessee. And you could see him coming up to Chicago the second half of the season. The way he's a 1.57 ERA. He's the most dominating starting pitcher in the Cubs system right now. And I see no reason why he couldn't come up. And if the Cubs are anywhere near 500, they're not going to make any trades. I don't think they're going to trade any prospects. I'd be very surprised. If anything, maybe they trade some of the guys on their team, but that's where it gets really interesting, right? Like the Cubs, just looking forward, right? They've got 7 games at home. They've been awful at home. One of the worst teams at home. I think they're 2-11 or something terrible like that. Really bad at home. They're 9-9 on the road though. So
just keep playing them all on the road.
So 4-11 at home. And, but they play 7 games, 3 against the Pirates, 4 against the Diamondbacks, and then they go on the road for 4 against the Reds. So that's 11 games. They're right now 7 games under 500. So, I mean, and we talked about this, the last podcast we had, which was, I don't even remember, Thursday or something, where they could possibly be very close to or at 500 after this Cincinnati series, depending on if they can start playing well at Wrigley, and it should be warmer. I haven't looked at the weather, but I'll look right now, but I'm assuming that it's going to be warmer in Chicago. Dangerous assumption.
Better be warmer than what it has been. Although I know there's, if it's anything like, I know the weather here is not directly correlating, does not directly correlate to Chicago. However, it was hot here for a while, and we had some storms just blow through actually each of the last couple of evenings. And so it kind of at the cusp of a cool front. So now it's in the 70s, for the next week or so, but cool in the mornings, and then warming up, we'll get a little cloud here and there. I mean, it's the Midwest, that's how it happens, but should at least be, a little bit nicer. But yeah, I mean, there is potential there for them to actually be mediocre, which is, I know, and I say that somewhat facetiously, but I think again, they're not on that 54 win pace anymore, right? They were at a 333 winning percentage heading into this, and it's early enough in the season, right, that they could. Now, granted, that 333 stretches all the way back to the day after the no-hitter in LA last year, but there's a potential, and I don't know if they've learned anything. I'm with you. I don't see them swinging any big moves, but if you look at last year when they started trading guys off, they were only a couple games below 500 or a couple games back, right? They were right in line. Like the Braves had an identical record, if I remember, or within a half game, whatever it was. They were right there. And what did the Braves do? The Braves ended up making some moves, catching fire, and winning a World Series. Now, again, I am not saying the Cubs would have won a World Series last year if they'd held on to the guys, made a couple more moves. I'm not saying they'll be in that position they could this year, but if you go through again and trade everyone off. So what happened last year? They traded all these guys off. They didn't make nearly enough moves to replace all those guys. If you now go and trade Kyle Hendricks, Marcus Stroman, Wilson Contreras, there's a bunch of other guys that, David Robertson's going to be traded. Michael Givens will probably be traded, right? Those guys are only 1-year dudes anyway, and they weren't on the team before. So there's very, very, very easy to replace them. But if you start moving again, some of those core pieces, guys who have been there for a long time and or who are major contributors, then you set things back further because now you need to go replace them in addition to the guys you didn't replace last year. And I've got news for you. It ain't all coming from the minors. The minor league system is really, really exciting right now, and there's a lot of guys playing really well. You do not simply replace all of your major players with prospects, at least not in 1 year, let alone 2. So if they are to do that, and an extra free agent class isn't as strong either, I don't know how they start to do that. You know what I mean? Like it really, that would be very worrisome to me on a couple of different fronts because they already haven't done what not only did they not do what they said they were going to do at all, which is to spend money on a contender, but they haven't done it in the manner that they said they would in terms of getting power arms. So, moving on from some of these dudes, man, I would be very, very concerned about what that means then for next year and the free agency group and kind of where that all goes. That said, I still think they're going to end up moving some guys. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard to expect their pitching to carry them the way that they carried them over these last two series for the remainder of the season. I just think that it's clear the offense is not going to produce a lot of runs, and it's going to be at the bottom of the league. I mean, their starters were 26th in F WAR coming into this series. Their bullpen was fifth in baseball, and so I mean that'd take a big flip for their starters to get better than that. But again, it'd be hard to think that they're going to stay as bad as they've been. And so that's where you've got Miley is a very serviceable number 4. He could be possibly a number 3. You know, if you get Stroman, you get Hendricks. I mean, if you start running through the possibilities and you throw Mills in there, and then you still have Steele, and then you still have Thompson, both of who would probably be in the bullpen. I mean, you could see this team having really solid pitching for the second half of the season. And I think that's where I come out is where are they going to come out at the trade deadline? And that's the interesting piece. It's like Wilson Contreras, obviously they have not extended him. Would they push to try to extend him before the trade deadline? I doubt it.
Probably not.
You know, when you talk about Robertson, would they hold on to him? I mean, I tend to agree. Even if you're doing well, you probably want to get rid of him just because of the value there, right? If he's a solid closer, somebody's going to want that, and he's 37 years old. And so it's going to be really interesting if the Cubs can play or get near 500 and their starting pitching kind of turns around and their bullpen stays as good as it's been. But their offense isn't going to be any better. And I think that's where you kind of come in and you say, even if their starters get better, it's hard to see how this team could be much better than a 500 team in any scenario, right? And that's where you have to start looking at the future of like, what's next year look like? Because we know that this isn't a World Series team, and isn't that really at the end of the day all that matters? Is that's what you're trying to build, right? Is a team that can get to the World Series. And I don't think this is a team that can get to the World Series, but you never know. I mean, you get into the playoffs, anything is possible. We've seen that in years past.
Yeah, I think the issue with that is as you said, though, you take this offense and put them in a series, 5, 7 games, even 3 games against truly dominant pitching to where they're all now. Granted, are they built a little bit to potentially withstand that, maybe to a greater degree than what they had when they were really boom or bust? Although we've seen them be boom bust here. But do you trust I don't care which, take your top 3, and really it's kind of a toss up. Like this rotation is not such that you have a very clearly defined roles 1 through 5, right? But take those top 3, and if you say, Hendricks, Stroman, Miley, Steele, put that 3 up against any other top 3 on a playoff contending roster, and you tell me which one you're taking. And I'll guarantee you're not taking the Cubs against any of them right now. You're just not.
Well, unless Caleb Killian was pitching.
Well, and that's possible, right? But here's the only thing there, and again, I know there's numerous reasons for it. Is we already talked about the rotation not going very deep into games, and they've been very, very judicious with him when it comes to his pitch count, right? They've really limited that. Now, is that like kind of a Steven, and he's not coming off of TJ surgery or anything, but you remember Steven Strasburg several years back where he was on a very straight, and he didn't even get to pitch in the postseason. They're like, once he hits this number, he is done for the season, right? And they really tried to ration those innings out for him. Is that something they're looking to do and say? And I know they talked about that with Braylon Marquez, right? As he was, we'll see what happens there, but of really limiting that and saying, hey, we're gonna keep the governor on here. Is that meant so that in the second half of the season he can ramp up further and go deeper into games and that sort of thing? That's possible, but right now he has been very limited. So then you still run into that same issue of every time out there you're looking at a guy maybe going 4 innings, right, and either needing a piggyback or putting a lot of tax on the bullpen regardless. And so we'll see. But I just, like I said, I'm very concerned with what, if you look at the Red Sox, and we've compared the Cubs to them for very, understandably for a while now, but when they would have those kind of really bad, like they'd win a World Series and then they would fall. There were a couple times when they just fell off badly, but they did it in such a way that they retooled things very, very quickly and were immediately back to competitiveness after 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And that's the issue that I see here with this team, is that it does not feel as if, right, certainly they were not competitive last year after trading everybody. They're not competitive this year to this point, and that could change. But barring some kind of significant change, right, and I'm talking about having a couple guys come up and really, really hit their potential immediately out of the gate, and then also spending significant money in free agency, barring some very big changes, this team is still looking at another, I'm not saying they'll suck next year, but they certainly are not going to be in a position to compete all of a sudden next year, on a high level. So it's man, we're getting some interesting ads popping up as I'm speaking here. But yeah, that's the part that bothers me, man. And I could definitely go after some of my thoughts on kind of organizationally. I'll let you finish spam blocking some of these comments.
I'm trying to do that. I would say so. Somebody commented that Killian's walks are up there. They are not up there. He has 12 walks. That is over 27 innings pitched or something like that.
I guess they're up for him because he'd had like an historically low walk total, but
he hasn't had more than 2 walks in a game. Let's put it that way. He hasn't gone more than 5 innings in a game either. And so that's kind of what you're talking about. But and so I mean, you don't think he's going to come in, and he's not going to come in and like save the day for the Cubs. I mean, realistically speaking, and that's kind of thinking Killian can come up and make an impact and the Cubs could be a playoff team by the end of the year is really just wishful thinking. I mean, at the end of the day, what you want here is for the Cubs to have a very high draft pick next year. They have a high draft pick this year, add another one next year. And that's when you're going to start seeing guys come up. I don't know if how many guys you're going to see. Let me change it. We're seeing guys come up because they're guys that aren't high top prospects. I don't know how many top prospects we're going to see come up this year. In fact, I'd almost think the Cubs, the management would be more inclined to keep those guys down and not bring them up until, after either 15 days or whatever it is. So they don't get a full year of service time next year, which would be service time manipulation for those that are playing, and then bring those guys up then, because there's no real advantage to bringing up any of their top prospects this season. Brendan Davis is hurt, first off, so we don't know when he's going to come back and what his status is going to be. But the fact that he's hurt tells me I'd be surprised to see him in Chicago this year. I mean, I don't know. Do you think any top prospects will come up this year?
I could see. I mean, if Velasquez keeps hitting the way he's been hot, Maldonado, there's a few guys. I think what we're seeing, we're gonna see a lot of guys, I think, move really quickly. Like Bryce Ball is just knocking the piss out of it at Double-A.
Yeah.
I could see him being a dude, not that he would come up and stay up, but we see that a lot with different players. Kyle Schwarber was one who came immediately up from Double-A, and he was sent back down, but that was done with a purpose. Now, this is at the time when we still did not have universal DH, and so he came up to essentially serve as the DH during an AL swing, right? And then it was going to go back to Triple-A. So, based on where some of the timing is, I could see someone because Ball's been a lot more aggressive, really jumping on it. Alexander Canario is another one who's just been raking. The strikeout rate's going to remain high, and I'm sure that's just going to be something you deal with. Pete Crow Armstrong is not going to come up, but I think he'll move up through the system. I think there are some guys, some hitters who could get a chance, depending on what we see with trades. You mentioned Killian. I think he's absolutely, especially if they end up trading a couple of starters, right? I could see that happening. Although in the meantime, darn well they're going to go with Luke Farrell or whoever else, right, to kind of bridge that gap. But
yeah,
Chase Strumpf is another guy who I think he's been around the system for a long time. I think he's someone who God forbid they could ever figure out a way to keep a middle infield together for more than like a game or two at a time before one or the other of them gets hurt or just sucks and has to be benched. But, Strumpf is a guy who could play a few different spots and maybe sub in there for you a little bit and be kind of a solid. The problem is here, though, especially when we're talking about these young guys and when they're going to come up and what they're going to do is it does nobody any value. If Nelson Velasquez is going to come up, it does him zero value to come up and be a bench guy, right? If you're learning and you're young and you're on the fly, and the same thing would apply to Brendan Davis. There's no reason to call him up unless he's coming up and will be a starter, an everyday starting guy in the lineup all the time. Because otherwise, what are you doing? You're taking up a roster spot and you're not actually developing him with everyday at-bats or plate appearances, right, that he could be getting at AA, at AAA, that sort of thing. So, as some of these guys get moved along, right, you got to figure like it just got brought up, right? VR is probably not going to be around the entire season. Who knows if Madrigal and Horner can ever stay healthy? Does Andrelton Simmons get flipped if he actually shows that he's got any talent? Somebody needs a defensive replacement kind of a guy. How many of these guys are gone that then you all of a sudden can give some of those innings to someone? But there aren't too many of those spots. And I think that's, again, are you going to get rid of Wisdom and have somebody come in at third? Or are you going to get rid of Schwindel? But then you got Rivas. So it's tough, man. I don't see a whole lot of that happening because there's just not a lot of room right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so I think best case scenario, if you're looking for the Cubs, for the future, right? 2 to 5 years down the road, is going to be trading Wilson Contreras at the deadline for sure. Possibly trading Marcus Stroman at the deadline. You're going to be able to get a lot for Wilson Contreras. I mean, it's going to be a haul. And if you look at how well the Cubs did in their trades last year and think about the guys that they traded there, I just think that they're going to get more for Wilson Contreras. They should. He's playing better than any of those guys at the time were playing when they got traded.
Yeah.
And he's a catcher, a premium position. And so I tend to think he's going to bring a lot of value. And you got PJ Higgins that is raking it in Iowa big time. Like he's just tearing it up. He's one of the Cubs' top 2 or 3 offensive players and in the minors right now. And, not a big name, but and certainly he's been around for years. I think he was waived by the Cubs a couple of years ago, wasn't he? And
he got DFA'd and brought back. Yeah, I think he just got DFA'd and then brought because they had him up. He was on the 40-man for a while there.
Yeah,
because they had him up for a minute. But then I think he cleared waivers and took the assignment. But it's and that's what's weird is like there were a lot of moves that got made like kind of minor league-ish, right? Like right before and during the lockout that I'm still trying to remember who some of these dudes are. I'm like, wait, when did they get this guy? Like, who's this person again? And I forgot all about it. But there's going to be a lot of those procedural moves, right? I think we mentioned this last show to where we're still seeing a lot of it where guys will come up, like Adrian Sampson comes up and he's activated for a day and then he's immediately DFA'd because they're like, we just don't want you on the roster. And they'll reach a point to where they don't have any more of those guys left that they can really manipulate in such a. And I don't mean that in the same time.
Because Sampson got picked up by somebody.
Yeah, I think he
did.
Yeah, pretty quickly, and he's been decent, right? I mean, he's been around there. There's a bunch of those guys who are, for lack of a better term, they serve as organizational depth, right? And they're the Cubs have always done a good job. Although
they get you through the season.
Yeah, soon it will no longer be worthwhile for them though to acquire all these guys as organizational depth because all that's doing now is stopping the players who really should be up, who really should be contributing, who are at that upper echelon of the minors. But they knew they weren't going to need those guys for the first few months of the season. So you pad the organization with some of these guys, quad A type players, until you reach the point in July and after where you can start relying, for sure what you're going to get from those prospects, or at least for sure that they've gotten what they can get out of whatever level of the minors they are. And we're starting to see that movement, right? That's why Canario went up to South Bend. That's why from South Bend to Tennessee. That's why Max Bain moved up. Jeez, I can't even talk. But, we're seeing that stuff happen. So
yeah, the pieces are moving in the kind of correct places, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about the minor league system, and to your point earlier in the season, there was just so much froth in the Cubs system. Kind of these guys who were just kind of filler pieces, for lack of a better term, and now those guys are kind of going away a little bit, but you don't want them completely out of the picture, because you feel like, if the Cubs are to kind of continue right around near the bottom of Major League Baseball record wise, you're going to need those guys to come up and kind of fill in, to the extent that you're not bringing up these top prospects, as I was mentioning earlier. So it will be very interesting to see what happens, as we go forward after the trade deadline, and to see how that plays out. But yeah, I have to think, because listen, the guys that are in the minor league system right now, you struggle to look at almost any player in the minor league system that you don't see a future for, unless it's that organizational depth type guy. But if you look at anybody that's lower than Iowa, from AA on down, pretty much every guy there is just a solid, future prospect for the Cubs. And imagine, so then add to what they've got, what they're going to get when they trade Contreras and whoever else they trade at the deadline, some more studs, and who they draft. And then if they don't do well this year, who they draft next year. You're going to talk about a system that is loaded potentially with major league prospect level talent.
Yeah, the only
and
problem
at
with
that
that
point,
yeah,
you're going to have to probably trade some of them, right? You
right.
can't have all these studs in the system. You're going to have to start figuring out ways to manage to that,
Well,
right?
and that's, again, therein lies the issue is, and we've said it, we know that they flat out lied about certain things, but calling this anything other than a rebuild, again, if they follow through, as we mentioned, and those guys end up getting traded, and they get another solid draft pick, you're looking at 3 years in a row of missing the postseason badly, right? Not really even trying actively, and that is a rebuild.
Yeah.
Anything more, to me, anything more than 1 year of that really starts to qualify, but certainly anything beyond 2 is very much a rebuild, right? Because that, and that's what you've got to do. Now, I will say this: so when we talk about the service time and talk about those guys coming up, and maybe not till next year, I would argue that realistically, the one, and I don't like that this is maybe an intentional ploy on the part of the team. This is a strategy, but the one thing that trading guys off, being uncompetitive, and knowing that you do not have a shot at the playoffs, the one thing that does is it allows you to bring in those young guys, to put them in that lineup every day, and to let them kind of, I don't want to say you want to force a guy to struggle, but it doesn't, it allows you to do that and have the leeway to let them struggle, because you don't really care what the results are. And if we're being honest, you'd actually rather lose. So if they're going to struggle, let them get that out of the way when the wins and losses don't matter as much, and they can just go out there and learn, and you can be confident, or at least comfortable in letting them play, and not having a potential learning curve be detrimental to the goals of the team, right? That it's actually, so I do like that. If we see them go that route, I want to see them, if we see a bunch of retread 35-year-old veterans out there all over the field come July after trades, then it's really a problem, and then it's just stupid. That's just incredible.
I think that's what you're going to see. I got to be honest.
It's so incredibly stupid. They're having trouble selling tickets as it is. Who the hell wants to watch a bunch of nobodies who never were's and has-beens and never will be's?
Because think of how many tickets they're going to sell if and when this works.
But that's what I'm saying, is like, you could at least do better, because you're still paying. Guess what? You're paying a rookie less than you are a guy on a major league deal who's been around for 10 years or whatever, right? Bring those guys up and at least give somebody something to be excited for.
The only thing I would say that would make that, to me, make more sense is bringing up guys in the second half of the season that are top prospects, is because I think what the Cubs are going to have to do, because their system is going to be so loaded, like we said, with Major League Baseball kind of level prospects is that they're going to have to bring some studs up. They're going to have to start their service time clock. They're going to be part of the next winning team, and they're going to have to trade some of these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the mistake that the Cubs made before is they had their system was depleted, and then B, they threw all their chips on the table to win that World Series because it was like 108 years. We've got to win. We're just going to do everything we possibly can. They don't have to do that anymore. They won their World Series. They can now manage to success versus managing to having to win it all and the pressure that built. And so I think that what they need to do is continue to build their system, which they're doing. They're going to do at the trade deadline. They're going to do with their draft pick this year and probably their draft pick next year, and bring some of those guys up, and then eventually trade, some studs to some other guys to get younger prospects who you can backload at the back end of your system.
Or I would prefer to see them do this, which is, again, there's no such thing as a pitching prospect, right? So you can't rely on that to an extent. They need to start moving some of these prospects for young, controllable arms. If you want to go out there and get a hard throwing dude, you either got to spend a shit ton of money, which obviously they didn't do, or you've got to go acquire Frankie Montas or Pablo Lopez or somebody like that from a shit team that is looking to unload these guys before they have to pay them. And Montas just struck out 12, I think, his last outing against the Angels. Lopez just had 11 his last start, which brings me to my other point, which is that Justin Steele had 10 strikeouts last night. It's most of his career. That's the first time. So here's some fun stuff. It's the first time a Cubs pitcher who was actually drafted by the Cubs has struck out 10 or more batters since Jeff Samardzija in 2014. So it had been 8 years since a Cubs pitcher drafted by the Cubs. The last time a Cubs lefty drafted by the Cubs, 10 strikeouts, Rich Hill in 2007. But the last time any Cubs pitcher had 10 strikeouts was Kyle Hendricks in 2020. It had been almost 2 years, 20 months since a Cubs pitcher struck out 10 batters.
That's shocking.
And it's funny that it was Hendricks. And the last lefty to do it for the Cubs was Jose Quintana in 2019. Again, also not a power pitcher. And Steele is only a power pitcher in that he is relative to the other guys in the rotation for the most part. He's 93 mile an hour fastball. That's not power. And I brought up the two guys I did because at one point or another, they've been mentioned on our pages elsewhere as trade targets. I look at Carlos Rodon, who would have been a perfect fit for the Cubs. No qualifying offer, high AAV, high risk, but that dude has struck out double-digit batters a couple times and is among the league leaders in strikeouts. Kevin Gossman, another guy, didn't have a QO, was going to be more expensive than we figured the Cubs were going. He's up there. And you know who leads Major League Baseball in strikeouts and has a couple of double-digit strikeout games this year? None other than Dylan freaking Cease, who's in on the south side because of Jose Quintana. So there are and Jed Hoyer sat up there and talked about bringing in power arms. And so as I look at it, I'm going like, well, here's a guy you traded away. Here's a guy you didn't sign. Here's a guy you didn't sign. Here's two guys you didn't or couldn't trade for. And so it doesn't have to be that you go out and spend $40 million a year on Max Scherzer. But if you don't go out and you cannot guarantee that Caleb Killian and a bunch of other dudes are all going to come up as saviors from the minors. You're going to have a fully homegrown pitching staff. That's just dumb. That's not going to happen. So you have to go spend some money or spend out of the prospect capital to get the power arms. It has to happen. That's the only way this thing flips quickly. Now, I guess the question is, as you alluded to, do they blow their wad on like two different trades and then they've eliminated all the top players in their farm system who then go on to star for someone else while the guys the Cubs get are only there for 6 months or suck. So,
and to me, that's the question, right? And that's to me why you don't trade Kyle Hendricks is I think that the Cubs can be very young with a bunch of their top prospects up next year and have a chance to make the playoffs. So I think that
if you keep Hendricks and Stroman and just trade Contreras and try to replace him with
probably Robertson,
PJ Higgins and some combination, Robertson. Yeah, I mean a couple of the, but I'm talking about like,
guys.
As of if we're talking like core type players who could or would be moved, if they only like,
I don't know that you don't trade Stroman because I don't think he's that valuable a piece. but if they're going to be good next year, you kind of feel like you need him, right? Unless you've got Steele or Mills is Miley on a 1-year deal?
Yeah, he's
Still.
just. I mean, they picked him up
So I mean,
for a
you
$10
got
million option.
You might see him get traded or not, but yeah, I mean, you kind of feel like if you're going to have a chance, because who else is going to come up besides Killian? That's gonna roll into the starting pitching
Jordan
rotation.
Wicks. I mean, I think at this point, I can't imagine.
Wicks is so young, though, right?
Well, I mean, he was a college pitcher, though.
He's new to the
he's
system,
college, but he's a college guy. So I mean, they can move quickly. Marquez. I think at this point, I've given up on Marquez being a starter. Giant question mark of whether he ever pitches at all, right? Let alone as a starter. I think there's obviously we're looking at DJ Hers is another one who I think could move. I mean, he's just been dominant the entire time. I just don't know
if he comes up next year, though.
Yeah, well, and I mean he could though. Again, if he moves, but he's again another very young guy. You've got some of these dudes moving up, so could that happen? I'm trying to think of who. God, who am I thinking? Cam Sanders. There we go. Finally, I couldn't even think of his name. He's looked really. I mean, he dominated his, at AAA now. Dominated his first time out there, and has been really, really good. So I think they have some of those guys coming up, but you really, really have to. There's only going to be a certain.
Oh yeah, we're forgetting about Alzolay too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Alzolay is the other one that just who knows. But there again, I have said for years and years, and he's pitched well enough at times to kind of waffle me out of it, but between the injury history, which is fairly significant, right? He's had some. This is the same thing that happened to him, I think, in 2018 that cost him basically the entire season. I don't know that he's a starter in terms of his long-term efficacy in terms of where he is best, right?
Yeah, but if he's not a starter and you've got Keegan Thompson, Justin Steele, and Adbert Alzolay in your bullpen, that's and they're healthy. I mean, there's not many better bullpens out there.
No, because then at that point you can deploy those guys in all kinds of different ways, and you can start piggybacking, or you could, you can stretch that rotation if you have those long, and if you have there's double headers, things like that going back and forth. But they have to go out. Like, you can't guarantee any of those guys will be a number one. You simply can't. The only way you can go do that is if you go buy a player who's out there, buy an established starter, preferably one who throws really hard. And the only way you do that is you either find a guy who's still got club control and who you can pry loose with a few prospects, or you got to spend a ton of money in free agency. And that's really, it's just one of those things that this team so far has not done. And they're like, they flipped it completely. They went from spending all their money on pitchers and couldn't develop any to now they're spending no money on pitchers or very little. And they're trying to work on developing all of them. It's like, you got to be in the middle somewhere, boys. You got to figure this out. And girls, there are some women moving up into the front office finally, but it's one of these things that has to change. I mean, it can't. You can't depend on the farm for everything, nor can you just spend money. Again, look at the Dodgers, man. Look at the Dodgers. Spend a shit ton of money, develop really well. Lo and behold, they're competitive every single year. The Dodgers are what the Cubs wanted to be, but they failed miserably in that regard. Other than actually winning a legitimate World Series, which the Dodgers have not done.
True. Good point. So a lot of exciting things going on in the Cubs system with the Cubs. And, this is going to be fun to watch over the next probably 5+ years. So I know it's hard right now, everybody, but hang in there. Things are definitely looking up. The Cubs are playing. They go tonight at Wrigley against the Pirates. 3 games in a row that all start at 6:40. We know Wade Miley is going tonight. We do not know who's going for the Pirates. We don't know who's going for the Cubs on Tuesday. My assumption is that's Stroman, if he comes back, which he's been out. I kind of haven't heard anything from him. So I don't know if we would expect to hear something today, but kind of weird to me that we haven't heard anything at all about Stroman. It's been several days. I don't know if he has COVID or what the deal is.
Yeah, he does.
So
it's the only way you can. Well, yeah, he has to. Because it's the only way you can put somebody on the IL without a designation.
But when did he go on the IL? It seems like it was over a week ago
It's been a
or
while.
close to it.
It was
And so
it was
that's
like
the thing
yeah,
is
it was
it's a
last week.
typical, what is it, a 5-day quarantine period?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that depends too on when you test, and I mean, maybe he keeps testing positive or something. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Yeah,
forget
yeah,
what they
maybe.
changed, but that's the only thing. But there is no designation, so it has to be COVID. Like that's the only possibility.
Yeah. And so, but my assumption is that he starts on Tuesday if he comes back, because it's TBD for the Cubs. And
I'm
then,
sure that's what they're waiting on, right? Like there's no other
yeah,
reason that they would, and then they'll have to activate him. So we'll probably hear something tonight or tomorrow morning, early afternoon. That he's been activated, he'll start.
yep.
But he's got to do something in the meantime too, right? Is he throwing on the side? Like I've seen him. He's been active on Twitter. With the horrible events of this past weekend, he was, it's all been kind of social commentary. It hasn't been about his pitching or anything, but I would suspect we see him on Tuesday.
Yep. And then we've got Smiley going on Wednesday. So, I mean, I'm interested to see how Miley does tonight, just because you feel like this is a good game for him to kind of get into a rhythm to go hopefully 5 innings. And then to have the bullpen kind of bring it home from there. I think we could very well see Keegan Thompson come in for Miley. That would make sense, I think. And then kind of he could bring it home, right? And so I think that's the best case scenario for tonight. And then if Stroman goes, you'd hope to see Stroman, the good Stroman that he was kind of trending towards before he went on the IL. And then Smiley. I mean, so you feel like you could win all 3 of these games, but you need to score some runs. So you need your starting pitching to be good, and you need to score like just 4 runs a game, I would say.
That would be ideal. Yeah, at least. But yeah, I think they can take 2 out of 3, which doesn't sound like a lot, but what they dropped 3 out of 4 to the Cardinals or to the Pirates the last time. Outside of there, they beat them 21-0 and lost the other 3 games. And they split those 2 with them earlier, right? So I mean, right there, you've lost 4 out of 6.
That's bound to shift, right?
You would think, because like the Pirates are not good. The Pirates are like 15-19, which isn't that bad,
but their run differential is terrible.
Right, they are a shitty team. They're not good. Like even Brian Reynolds is supposed to be their best player, and he has not done anything this year. I mean, very little anyway. Like Dan Vogelback's one of the best hitters, which more power to him. I love seeing. I mean, he's an absolute unit, man. So seeing the thick boy out there slugging is fun, but this is not a team that should give anybody any kind of trouble. And yet, here we go, and they somehow they have the Cubs number. So to me, again, winning 2 out of 3, hey, that's your 3rd series win in a row. It's a team that's giving you fits, and really for the last several years. And that's good to me. And get into Cincinnati. I'm gonna go to the game. I'm gonna go to a game in Cincinnati next week, so that'll be nice. Maybe we'll see the win. Like, that's bad, but anyway.
So we'll be looking for tweets from you for the from
see what we can do there
next Monday through Thursday. So we're saying I agree. I think 2 of 3 is good. I do think the Cubs could obviously sweep this series. And so we'll see what happens there. And then they play the D-backs. We're not going to do a show before the D-backs because I'm going to be traveling, but so our next show will probably be next week. Well, it'll be next week at some point, but I'm going to be traveling all next week as well. And so 2 or 3 from the Pirates. And then I don't know what happens with the D-backs. I mean, that was kind of a unexpected series, I would say, that we just saw over the weekend. I didn't expect them to win, the Cubs to win 2 of 3, and the way they did it, winning both the games they won in the 9th inning. Kind of unusual for the Cubs this year. I could see the Cubs splitting the series against the D-backs. I could see them going 1-3. I could see them going, 3-1.
Yeah,
really hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I like if my brain says 4-3 out of the 7 games.
Yep,
right.
I get you. I'm with you.
I will take. And then the optimist in me says, you know what, God, I mean they could go 5-2. I think with relative ease, but at the same time, then the other part of me is going like, wait, but they could go 2-5. Like when you don't score a lot of runs, and that I think this is going to be one of those we're going to see the same thing that we've seen for those, as you mentioned. There's going to be a bunch of games that are decided by 1 or 2 runs. I think over the course of these the 7-game homestand, and if we see a Cubs team that can score in the latter 5 to 6 innings, they walk away. I think that's the difference between, and I would be willing to stake a fair bit of money on this, that what we'll see is that the team that scores the most runs in innings 6 through 9, whether that be Cubs on one hand, opponents on the other, will really win that series, this run, in a big way. And I know that might sound silly, but like you could be up 10-0. You can score 10 runs in the first inning and never score again for the next 9. The other team could score 8 runs in the 9th inning. You still win. Right, but that's what I'm saying. I think these are all going to be fairly close contests that are decided late by whichever team's bullpen can hold. Whichever, hey, Frank Schwindel goes out, textbook, outside, loops a little shot into right field, and a run comes home to score. That's what this team is built to do. That's what they should do. But we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. So let's say they go 5-2. They're 18-22. They're only 4 games under 500. Heading to a 4-game series at Cincinnati where they could sweep them, and they could also be swept. So
I don't even know if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible for Cincinnati to win 4 straight games under any circumstances. So
that's true. That's a good point. It's like the bad news Bears.
A split would almost feel bad there. Like, I just don't know. Cincinnati just no-hit the Pirates and lost. Like, that's how bad they are. They lost a no-hitter. Right? Like, how awful are you at that point? So I do feel like if the Cubs can make a run here, right, you got to feel good about their shot to get at or close to 500 by the time they finish up with and then, the schedule gets harder again than the back, week and a half or so of the month. So, hey, make hay while the sun shines. Hopefully they do some good things. We'll see.
Yep. So I guess that's the long way of saying that I think the Cubs could be very close to 500 come May 27th. And then they play 2 against the White Sox at Comiskey. And 3, I know it's not Comiskey, so don't get on me. And then what, 3 or 4 against the Brewers? Yeah.
Something like that.
It gets real tough because then they play 4 against the Brewers and then 5-game series against the Cardinals.
Which because they got that rescheduled. Don't they have a rescheduled one in there for
could really just define the Cubs season. By June 6th, we should know exactly where we are. And the Cubs go to play the Yankees in New York, the middle of next month as well. Do the Yankees come to Chicago? I don't think they do.
This should be their. Isn't that the AL? They're playing the AL East though this year, right?
Yeah.
So shouldn't they trade them back and forth, or I guess you don't do that with every team every time, right? So
let's look. I do not see the Yankees coming because that would have been kind of cool with Rizzo hitting, like 4 bombs in a 3-game series.
Well, not at Wrigley though. He's got to have that short porch out there and right at Yankee Stadium and he's been hitting like shit lately. So we'll see.
Yeah. So it should be interesting. Hopefully the Cubs do well tonight and Miley pitches at least 5 innings. We'll see. We'll circle back with you guys next week. So until then, thanks for joining us. Go Cubs.